Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Wild Interviews with Fabrizio Lasardi. Today, we have another special guest with us. It is Marta Curti from the Peregrine Fund and the Ridgway Hawk Project. I'll give you a little insight on the species. The Ridgway hawk is one of our world's most endangered birds of prey. It is only found in a small portion of the Hispaniola Island in the Caribbean. If you don't know which island is Hispaniola, it is the island that is shared by both Haiti and Dominican Republic. This species is currently only found in the Dominican Republic, but thanks to the work that Marta and the Peregrine Fund does, this species is having a little rebound from their critically endangered status. And they are being found in other parts of the island after, not only in national parks after their death. So, welcome, Marta. It's awesome to have you, and I hope we can talk about this species more deeply.
Thank you, Fabrizio. It's awesome to be here, and I'm very excited to get to talk to you and everyone who's listening about the Ridgway's hawk and the work the Peregrine Fund is doing in Dominican Republic.
Great. That's the spirit, Marta. So, well, first of all, what can you tell us about you? Like, how did you start into conservation? What inspired you to work with this species and with the Peregrine Fund in general? What can you tell us about you?
Yeah, well, I've been working with the Peregrine Fund for about 20 years now, but like you, from a very young age, I loved wildlife. I grew up in a really big city, but still every once in a while we were able to see great horned owls and coyotes and things like that. And I loved it. But I will confess that I was never a fan of science in school. And I never dreamed that I would get to work as a biologist when I was younger. I never thought that would be possible. But after I graduated from college, I started working as an educator in national parks and with the Fish and Wildlife Service. And every free minute I had, I volunteered my time to go with the biologists and help them on their projects. So I helped count sandhill cranes in New Mexico. I did roadkill surveys in Arizona. And I met someone there who worked for the Peregrine Fund, and I loved the idea of working with birds of prey. So I applied and I worked, my first job with the Peregrine Fund was working at a release site for the Oplomado falcon in Texas. Yeah, which was amazing. And since then I've gotten to work with, of course, amazing people, but amazing birds, from California condor to harpy eagle right here in Panama. And of course, for the past 10 years, I've been working with the Ridgway's Hawk Project within a wonderful team of local people and some biologists directly with the Peregrine Fund in Dominican Republic. It's been amazing.
That's lovely to hear, and not only that, but all the species you've worked with, from the Aplomado falcon to the sandhill crane to the California condor. That's simply awesome. And not only that, I liked something you mentioned, that when you were a kid, you wouldn't think you were going to become a biologist. And,
right.
and that's something conservationists and the social media and all have been trying to change, to inspire young people to become conservationists and protect the nature and wildlife when they grow up. So that's great to know, and well, that we are changing for good and for the conservation of this species.
Absolutely. And it's always, I think if you follow your dreams, whatever they may be, if it's conservation or doing art or being a doctor, anything, I think it's wonderful. Just keep following and pursuing, and you never know what life is going to bring you. And I'm so excited to meet you, someone so young who's interested in conservation. I think that's wonderful.
I'm so excited to meet you too. You know, from the first time you said you were here in Panama, it was like, wow, I definitely need to meet her, because, I've also been trying to have a series for my channel. I hope some of my viewers, if you are seeing this, have checked it out. It only has one video, but there are 2 or 3 interviews coming up soon. That series is called Conserving Panama's Natural Treasures. and it is, well, about Panamanian wildlife. It goes from the small amphibians to birds to mammals, and I'm trying to, like talk about the most endangered species and lesser known I can talk about. So, well, Marta, I read that the project of the Ridgway's Hawk project started in 2000 in
Yes.
Dominican Republic. And what's the history behind it? I mean, like how it started, what, how were your first years or your first months working with the species, and what's the best thing of working with the Ridgway's hawk?
Oh, a lot of great questions. So a little bit of the history. Well, the Peregrine Fund's history. The Peregrine Fund was working with the species before I started on the project. But the Peregrine Fund itself was founded in 1970 to help conserve the peregrine falcon in North America. And thanks to that success, the Peregrine Fund has been working with birds of prey all around the world and really focusing on those birds of prey that are most endangered or that we know the least about. And of course, the Ridgway's hawk falls into that category. As you mentioned, it's a critically endangered bird of prey. And when the Peregrine Fund started in 2000 working with the species, there were only about 200 or 250 individuals left. I first went to Dominican Republic in 2004, I think, I was working here in Panama with harpy eagles. And I went to Dominican Republic to help a little bit with their environmental education program. I got to see a Ridgway's hawk in the wild, actually two. It was amazing. Little did I know that, 7 or 8 years later, I'd actually be part of the team working to conserve this species. The best thing, there's so many wonderful things about working on the project. Our team is amazing. We work with most of the biologists on the project are local Dominicans, which is wonderful. And part of my job is doing a lot of environmental education. So I get to go into these remote communities and visit people one-on-one, door-to-door, and just really get to know people and talk just one-on-one about conservation, the importance of birds of prey, and seeing kind of that change where people realize how important this species is and that this species really is important in Dominican Republic because it only is found on the island of Hispaniola is amazing. Just seeing that change is incredible. It's the favorite part of my favorite part of the job.
Exactly. And yes, involving the people, involving the local communities. And I believe that without the help from the local people, we can really achieve much things in conservation. Because, for example, as you mentioned, you have to go door to door telling people why is it important to conserve this species, why it should be an emblem to the island because it is only found there. And it's incredible. That this story reminds me of the Mauritius kestrel in the island of Mauritius.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to Carl Jones and his team, they saved the species literally from 4 individuals to more than 200, 150. That's great. And I hope that the same is happening with this species, that it is going to have greater numbers and going to one day not be critically endangered anymore.
Thank you. Well, we're seeing that that's happening. I have to tell you, Fabrizio, as we're talking, there's a crane hawk on the roof of the house across the street from me, trying to catch something in the roof, which is pretty cool. So wildlife is visiting us as we speak. But yes, getting back to the Ridgway's hawk, we are actually seeing the numbers increasing. So as I mentioned, when we first started with the project in the year 2000, there were about 200 or 250. Now we estimate the population to be around 400 individuals. So it is growing little by little. And it's also expanding. We've been doing release programs. So we're really taking young birds and releasing them in different areas to help them start new populations, which is going quite well. And then really working with the local people to stop hunting, to get people involved directly in conservation has made a huge difference for the species.
Well, before continuing, and now that you mentioned about the falcon in your the hawk in your neighbor's house, well, that's definitely what I mentioned. Clayton is like the haven for wildlife lovers in Panama City. It's it's awesome to see all those animals like wild freely, and you are in your house. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's a pair of crane hawks that every once in a while I'll see them or hear them calling, and here it is just across the street. It's incredible.
Great. But uh, going back to the Ridgway hawk, I also read about what you do with the palms. Uh, they normally nested on another type of tree, and but now there are not many of that type of tree, and they nest is in palms. But as palms, like periodically change. I don't know how to explain it, but the
Yeah,
thing that the nest sometimes fall or sometimes.
exactly. So if you can picture a palm tree, it has many fronds, many big leaves, right? Fronds. And naturally, the fronds will fall away with time as they die and fall off. And so then a lot of the nest is balanced, in and on those fronds. So if too many fall, then the nest will start to also fall with it. So our team then must stop that from happening, of course, while there are eggs in the nest or while the nestlings are very young, to prevent them from falling. So they climb the tree. If there's a frond that's falling, they'll actually saw it. They'll cut it so that most of the weight falls to the floor, but the main base, the structure is still there. So that keeps it in place. And a lot of times, depending on the condition of the palm, they might put in some rope and secure it that way as well. And it's really a temporary fix just until the nestlings are big enough and out of the nest. So it doesn't
Wow.
need to last forever, but it needs to last, about 2 months or so. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I read about it, and literally you do all of that to protect the nest and the hatchlings, and well, it's great. And what about the like not the reintroduced, but the chicks or the chicks or the young um hawks that you release on other parts to kind of rewild those area with the species?
Yeah.
What is the scheme around it? I mean, like, you get them when they are young and just release them in that place, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to explain that to you. So the reason we're doing it is because, as I mentioned, when we first started working with the species, there were only around 200 or so, but they were all in just one area in one park. And so you can imagine if something were to happen, like a major hurricane, a major fire, a spread of disease, all with all the birds in one place, that could be very dangerous because they all could get wiped out by one major event. And so part of our work is to create other populations on the island. So what we do, it's a technique that was used with the reintroduction of peregrine falcons, oplomado falcons, even harpy eagles. So we pull young birds from the nest, usually Ridgway's hawks. They can have between 1 and 3 nestlings. We try and pull young from a nest that have at least 2. That doesn't always work out, but that's our goal, so that we leave 1 in the nest and we pull 1. We pull them, yes, when they're young, before they're able to fly, when they're about 34, 32 days. And we bring them to the area where we're going to release them. And they spend 7 to 10 days inside an artificial nest. So this artificial nest is completely closed. There's bars on the front so they can see outside, but the other 3 sides, and of course, as a bottom and a roof, are closed. So they stay inside that box, and that becomes their new home, basically. It's this artificial nest. We usually release about 5 to 7 at a time, so they're not lonely. They're all in there as a group from different nests. And they become used to it. So to them, this is their new nest, their new home. We feed them through, every day they get food. And once they're ready to fly naturally at the natural age, which is about 45 days, it varies a little bit, but about 45 days, we go up when it's dark. We put food around the artificial nest. So it's set on a platform. So there's place for them to walk around. And then we gently open the door while they're still asleep. And then we wait for the sun to come up. And when the sun comes up, they slowly wake up and realize that, hey, this door is open. And eventually, it might take them a few minutes, it might take them all day, but eventually they come out. And the idea is that they will eat and realize, okay, this is a safe place. This is where I have food. And so eventually, of course, they'll fly away, but they continue to come back for food to the release site. So they'll continue to come back. We monitor them. They are all banded. So we read the bands. So we know exactly which birds are coming back. If a bird isn't coming back, then we go try and find it. And usually they depend on the food that we provide for about 2 months to 3 months. But eventually, because they're getting enough food from us, they're also having the energy to go out and try and catch lizards and snakes and small birds. And eventually they get it. They learn how to hunt. And once they do, they slowly stop coming. They might show up to the release site, but they won't eat. They'll take off. And we know that that bird then is doing well. And usually by 3 months, all the birds are gone and independent.
It's incredible to know about that. And not only that, but yeah, that's, I imagine, a great feeling when you see that the bird is not coming back, like it's now independent, ready to form new families or new pairs, new breeding pairs. And yeah, well, by the way, you mentioned about they are only in one place in the Los Alces National Park.
Yes.
So that's the scenario you mentioned about if a hurricane or a disease comes, this could wipe out the entire species. Well,
yes.
When Hurricane Maria went to Bahamas,
Yes.
I think it was two or three species. One was a parrot, but I think that was and there was a bird of prey, and it almost went extinct because of that. They almost disappeared. The hurricane was too devastating.
Yeah. Exactly. So we're really trying to protect the Ridgway's hawk from having that same thing happen. And so we started releasing birds, for example, in an area called Punta Cana in 2009.
Punta Cana.
Yeah, and the first pair, so there had been no hawks seen in that area for decades. And in 2009, we started releasing. In 2013, we had our first pair who hatched their first chick nestling and fledged it successfully. That was 2013. And last season, we had 17 breeding pairs, and they hatched 21 wild young in Punta Cana. So that population is really growing. And we're just starting breeding season again now. So our staff is down there monitoring and checking nests and all that already. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I might not be able to go this year, which I miss it. Yeah, but our local crew is doing an amazing job of monitoring the birds and doing education. So,
by the way, now that you mentioned, how has COVID affected the project? I mean, like, yes, at least the local crew in Dominican Republic is doing their best to continue the work. But what about, I mean, like, yeah, how did COVID affect the project overall?
Yeah, so for the most part, so we have about 20 local biologists working on the project, and they've been with us for a long time. So they're really well trained and really passionate about the work that they're doing. So for the most of the field work was able to get done. There were some nests that our crew couldn't get to. At some point we had to put in some protocols just for their safety in place. They weren't able to be in the field as much as they would have been in a normal year. But most of the work they were able to get done. The only thing that we really weren't able to accomplish last year, we started a new release site. Like I mentioned, we had one in Punta Cana. We started a new one in 2019. We released 25 birds, and we were hoping to release 25 more last season. But that we did decide to postpone, just because neither I nor Thomas, who's the field manager, could get down there. And it's a very involved process and takes a lot of experience. So we put that on hold.
Yeah, I imagine, all the logistics and all this stuff. Yeah. Well, I actually talked with Thomas first, and yes, he redirected me to you. And well, yes, I hope everything keeps going well down there in Dominican Republic.
Thank you.
And yes, the Ridgway hawk needs to be known by more people, and and needs, like a better scope in the conservation world. Like, it is not only elephants, it is not only zebras, giraffes, lions, or, yeah, there are also smaller species that are charismatic, that are mm, that are kind of beautiful, that
Yes.
are beautiful, they do are, and but that they don't have the attention they deserve or the attention they currently need. So that's
Ab-
what this channel wants to change, to give the attention to those lesser known needy species.
That's wonderful. And that's really something needed, exactly as you say, that there's these large animals that everyone knows about, that everyone loves, and you're right, they receive most of the attention. But if you have an animal that is not traditionally beautiful, like vultures, even though I love vultures and they are amazing and so important to the ecosystems in which they live, but people aren't as interested in them because maybe physically they don't look as nice as as a bald eagle or a harpy eagle. So I appreciate it so much that you're really trying to spread the word about some of the lesser known species that are just as important, some of them more important to the ecosystem in which they live. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, you know, inside out, thank you to you for doing that, for all of those birds of prey that are one of the bird species with some trouble, because the culture or what people think about them are like bad things, like, for example, vultures eat the cattle or eat the chickens, and but they are actually good, they are actually beautiful species, and sometimes all of that is a bit exaggerated.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite vulture species is the king vulture, and well, it is because of its face. It is, so colorful, and but yes, all of them. I have a turkey vulture. They are very rare where I live. There are many
Mhm.
black, but not too many turkey, and
Okay.
I like that turkey. So yeah, vultures. Well, what can we do? They are beautiful, and still, well, we need to protect them too.
Exactly. And because they eat dead animals mainly, they really help prevent the spread of disease. They help clean up the environment. They're extremely important, extremely important. So we absolutely do need to save them as
Exactly.
well. And I
Well,
agree. Yes, go ahead.
well, it's okay. Well, I think now we are going to the part of the fun facts. What fun facts can you tell us about this species?
Okay, well, you already mentioned that the Ridgway's hawk is only found on the island of Hispaniola in Dominican Republic. Something else really cool about this species is that they're monogamous. So the male and the female will stay together for life. Both the male and the female work together to care for the young, raise the young, which I think is amazing. Something else really cool is they eat a lot of rodents, which is something really important. They eat rodents, they eat small birds, they eat frogs and lizards and snakes. But something really that I love talking about with people is, because Ridgway's hawks are top predators, like other birds of prey, they really play an important role in the ecosystem by maintaining a balance of the prey populations. And on the island of Hispaniola, like much of the Caribbean, there really aren't other top predators. Here in Panama, of course, we have jaguars, we have many large animals, ocelots and coyotes and things like that that are terrestrial hunters. But in the Caribbean,
Oh,
they
oh, yes, yes. There
no,
are not many in the Caribbean.
it's only birds of prey. So birds of prey are so important to those ecosystems because they are the only top predators there. So they really have an important job to do. And I think that that's a cool fact about Ridgway's hawks and the other birds of prey that are found in the Caribbean.
Well. Now that you mentioned, in that moment that we talked, I was thinking about it. What top predator could the Caribbean have? And I was like, there are no big cats or small cats. There is just birds of prey. And what's more interesting is that in those islands, even smaller ones, there are native, they are endemic species.
Yes.
There are many times not only the well-known, but also lesser known like this one, and are endemic, which if they disappear, they'll disappear forever because they are not found anywhere else in the world. So,
Exactly.
and I imagine the rodents that they eat. Are there hutias? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yes, there are hutillas. Yes, we haven't, they may take hutillas. We have not, as far as I know, documented them feeding on a hutilla. Mainly they take rats, and most of the rats that are introduced, they used to have, so Hispaniola had, I don't remember the exact number, but over 20 endemic mammals. Now they're only down to 2. Only 2 are left. The rest have gone extinct. So the rodents that are there now are mainly introduced. They get introduced when they come accidentally on cruise ships or many other ways. So the Ridgway hawk is actually doing a very good job. What we do have there are mongoose that were introduced on purpose as well, and they're a problem too.
Yeah, they are a big problem actually. If I heard right, they were introduced to eat another species and to control pests in the cane or sugar cane or several plantations in the islands, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and that didn't
Mongoose.
work.
It didn't work exactly.
It didn't work. It didn't work, and now we have mongoose everywhere. So yeah, so Ridgway's hawks are mainly feeding on. I mean, they do take, of course, local native snakes and lizards and things like that. But yeah, that's the wonderful thing about nature when it's in balance, is that always there's fewer predators than there are prey species in general. So really, it's a balance. And even though they might kill a native snake, they're not going to destroy or end up, finishing an entire species. That doesn't happen.
Exactly. Well, now that you mention, what's the normal height of the Ridgway hawk? I imagine it is very small or somewhat small, right? Or
Yeah,
what?
they're not very big. They're smaller, they're much smaller than a red-tailed hawk. If you're familiar with red-tailed hawks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are like, a bit smaller. And what can you tell me about their lifespan?
Their lifespan. Mm-hmm. So right now, we don't know how long they live. Yeah, we don't know that yet. We're hoping to find out. I think the oldest bird that we know of, because we know that the bird was banded in a certain year. And I want to say it's been about 14 or 15 years since that bird was banded, and we're still seeing it. So that bird is at least 15 years old. But we estimate maybe they live to be 20, 25, but we don't know yet. So we're hoping to learn that as well. So we really, one of our big goals is to band, all the birds we release are banded, and we band as many nestlings as we can. We have banded adults as well. So eventually, with time, we'll be able to know how long they live.
Well, that's one of the amazing things of this species, that we don't know yet all of what we can learn about them. And that's also why it is important to keep researching, to keep investigating, studying, and trying to discover what we don't know. That reminds me of the pink fairy armadillo in Argentina. Well, it's the same, but thanks to Mariela Superina, she made several studies and published and reports and things. That's really good too, because she discovered a lot of things we didn't knew about that species. And I hope the same happens here. We need to know what's lifespan and some other things about the species, right?
Exactly. And we're learning a lot. And there's so many birds of prey that we just don't know very much about. So there's a lot of room for young people like you who are interested in conservation to one day go and really study a species and answer all of these questions that you have. There's still a lot of opportunity to do that.
Yeah, of course. And we need more conservationists, exactly like you say. There are not enough conservationists to cover all the species that need help right now. And if climate change, if we continue with habitat loss, deforestation, more species are going to need our help. So yes, we need more conservationists.
Absolutely, I agree.
Well, Marta, now we go to the area where we talk about the threats of the species. What are its main threats, or yeah, what caused the current crisis of this species?
Okay. Um, well, the truth is that there isn't really one definitive thing that you can say this was what caused the decline of the species, but we think it's a combination of many different factors. And there's two main things that we've seen in the work that we've been doing. One is that people unfortunately do shoot the hawk. They'll shoot it sometimes to eat it, but most of the time they will shoot it because sometimes the hawks will take young chickens. And so it creates this conflict between the raptors and humans. And that's something we're really working to solve. So that's one threat. There's actually one person in the town where we're working who he says in his life, now he eventually ended up working for the project and it all turned out great. But as a younger person, he thinks he's killed about 100 Ridgway's hawks, just himself. Yeah, just himself. So one of the things that we're doing to combat that is hiring local people so that they can earn a living by conserving the hawks instead of shooting them. So that's been a really big change. But that's one of the problems that the hawk has. The other way we're trying to combat that is we provide free chicken cages to houses around Ridgway's hawk habitat. So the nice thing about the Ridgway's hawk is because of its size, it can only take chickens that are maybe 3 weeks old maximum. So once the chickens are full grown, the hawk isn't a threat. So we're able to give free chicken coops to all the houses around where Ridgway's hawks live, and they can put the tiny chickens inside. And then once they're big enough, then they can let them free range. So that's also been a really big help because that then cuts down on hawks hunting chickens and really reduces.
Exactly. And yes, that's a big issue that, for example, in many rural places, they just let the chickens free roam. And yes, there are constant threats because there is not only the birds of prey, but also in here at least coyotes, possums, snakes, a wide variety of things. And yes, I believe a good way of avoiding it is by having the chickens in a safe place, or in a place that they won't be a prey or an easy prey for an animal.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something really important that we're trying to do, really, understanding that people, chickens are sometimes, for people living in rural communities, that's their main source of protein, sometimes income. So we can't just say, oh, it's not important that a hawk is eating your chickens, because it is important to them and it's important to us. So we have to work on ways to make life good for people and for the wildlife that we're trying to conserve.
Exactly.
Sure.
And yes, the livelihoods of those, that's another thing I like about the project and about many different conservation initiatives, that you kind of change the livelihoods of the people so that they don't need to kill the species or deforestate or clear the habitat of the animal, but rather work to conserve it along with you. And yes, that's a good part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that, to me, that's the most important part of the work that we do. Another threat too, I don't know if you read about the bot flies.
Yes, I did. And it's a bit concerning that the chicks are so susceptible to this parasite. And not only that, but the quantity. It is not one or a little ones, but it's a lot of them in all the area, right?
Yes. So for your listeners or your viewers, so there's a fly that yes, it will lay its eggs inside the nest, and when the larvae hatch, they actually burrow into the flesh of the nestlings. And so a nestling is just covered; it doesn't have full feathers; it just has little fluffy down. So it's very easy for the larva to get to the skin and then burrow inside. And as you mentioned, it's the quantity. Sometimes will find 60 or 70 or more larvae inside one little nestling. And so of course, without treatment, without intervention, then most often than not, those nestlings will die. But we have a really great treatment protocol that we use now that we had a researcher named Martin that came from Argentina that was helping us solve this problem. And so it's still a problem in the fact that we have to intervene. So we're looking for more natural ways to prevent fly infestations. But anyway, it's called permacap. And so our team goes up when there's still only eggs in the nest. They gently remove the eggs. They spray the permacap in the nest, and then they replace the eggs and come back down. And that actually lasts. That keeps the flies away for about 2 months. So for the entire nesting period until the chicks fledge, it keeps them larva free. And every once in a while we might find one with 1 or 2, but for the most part, it works really, really well.
But I still imagine that this is a kind of very difficult thing to do because, as you mentioned, there are 400 Ridgway hawk estimated to be. Mm-hmm. And if we count all the nests of that, let's say that the 400 are pairs, you know, like 200 nests, it's quite a lot. And yes, I think there could be, if we research a bit more, natural ways of preventing it. Because I imagine that in the time, I mean like 19th, 18th century, the bird was not very endangered because of the bot's flight, right?
Well, it's very interesting. I think the bot fly definitely contributes to it. So there's the first documentation of this particular species, it's Philornis pisci, is in Dominican Republic. We don't know if it was, and it was, I believe, in the 1800s. So we don't know if it was introduced or if it was naturally from that island. There are others, of course, other species that are affecting the birds in the Galapagos and things like that, that I'm sure you've read about. And there's other birds that also get infested with the fly larva, but they are seemingly unaffected. They survive and they fledge.
It is like a symbiotic, or well, not symbiotic at all, but yeah, beneficial relationships. They do no harm, but they use the birds as, like place to grow, and the larvae, I mean, and the butterfly.
Yeah. So I think the birds that survive, it probably still, it has to hurt them, but they're able to survive. But the Ridgway's hawk, for whatever reason, is not. But I think, the Ridgway's hawk, well, it, likely evolved with this fly. So probably many nestlings died, but when all of the other threats came, when humans started killing it, maybe when forests were cut down, maybe something happened to increase the fly population. We don't know what the history is, but it's definitely a factor that contributes to the overall decline of the species. And we don't want to wipe out the fly because the fly is also part of the ecosystem there. So we need to find a balance where we can, and what our researcher is saying is that if all the other threats are gone, if people stop shooting hawks, the population can remain stable even with botfly infestations. But right now, we need to control the botflies to help get the population numbers up.
Well, yes, at least reduce the number of the botfly, but yes, you are completely right on that we cannot wipe out the botfly, because then we would wipe out the species of the ecosystem and the balance would be broken, if we can say so. Yes. But, well, Marta, before ending up the interview, what can you tell me about the achievements you have made since 2000 up to date, apart from the ones you've already mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned, I think for me, the biggest accomplishment is really making people aware of the Ridgway's hawk. So apart from our work in the communities and hiring people, which is of course so important, we also do a lot of environmental education. So we visit schools, we visit communities, and now people really are becoming more and more aware of the hawk. And something that's showing that, it's very interesting. One of my coworkers there, every once in a while she'll send me a picture that people are starting to paint, they just paint murals, and all of a sudden they're including the Ridgway's hawk in the mural. Whereas, years ago, we never would have seen that. Some schools have adopted the Ridgway's hawk as their mascot. Local baseball team has now the Ridgway's or the Hawks. So just seeing people starting to take ownership and starting to become aware of the hawk and its importance, that's to me is a really, really huge, huge accomplishment. And the nest, the botfly treatment, we've been able to increase nesting success by 4 times what it is without treatment, which is huge. So really, I feel like this project is making so many advances, and I think we have a really good chance of getting the Ridgway's hawk off of the endangered species list eventually. It takes time, but
great to hear, and yes, hopefully in some time. As conservation, it is not from a day to another. It takes years, sometimes even decades. But yes, I am confident that eventually this species will get out of the endangered list and be just a normal species. Yeah. And well, also, do you have any future projects for, like for the species, like more reintroduction programs or stuff like that?
Well, so our goal is to have 2 to 3 separate populations outside of Los Etisas National Park. So right now we have the one in Punta Cana that's growing. And as I mentioned, in 2019, we started a new release site. So we're going to continue at that new release site, at least for 1 more year, releasing birds, then continuing to monitor them. And then we need to still find another site. So we do have a lot of steps to make. And with education, we really want the entire country, everyone in Dominican Republic, to know about the Ridgway's hawk within the next 7 years or so. Because really we're concentrating on the areas where there's hawks now, but we want to expand our education program to the entire country.
Incredible. And I hope you can succeed in that and continue working on for the species.
Thank you very much.
Marta, now, would you care to say a message to my viewers? Like an inspiring message about conservation, about the Ridgway's hawk, or about anything that you feel that should be inspiring for my viewers.
Okay. Well, you're an inspiration, Fabricio, to start with. Your knowledge is amazing. Your passion about conservation is amazing. And I think, I guess my message would be for people to do the best that they can in this world. I think we always hear treat others as you want to be treated. And I think that extends to all living things. Being kind to ourselves, being kind to each other, and being kind to all wildlife. I think that's really important. And you always hear conservation starts at home. And I think that that's true. It's wonderful to be able to donate to a conservation project or volunteer, but really the best thing that we can do is right in our backyards. If we're on the beach and we see some trash, why not, let's pick it up, clean it up. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about that I see so much, not only here in Panama and Dominican Republic, all over, but people who keep, for example, wild animals in cages. That's really a big thing of mine that I really like to talk to people about, because so many people say, oh, I love birds, but then they have a bird inside a cage. And I think that bird isn't happy, that bird is suffering. So if we really love something, go out, observe the bird in the wild, learn how to identify the species, not only by sight, but by calls, take up photography, just learn to love the bird or whatever animal it is in its wild space. There's no reason to put an animal in captivity. Wild animals don't belong there.
Completely agree with you on that, Marta. It's a sad sight, and that it's not only that is affecting thousands of species, not only here in Latin America, but in Asia, that they are taken into a cage and live all their lives. You know what's like to have 45 years a parrot spending 45 years of their lives in a cage.
Yeah.
Well, that's something, yes. That's something that happens. And it's sad. It's very sad to see. And yes, hopefully with more education and with more awareness, we can change that, or at least stop some people from buying or having these birds in a cage.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, everybody, if you want to support the work that Marta and the Peregrine Fund does, I will leave you the link down below. Remember to subscribe, to like, and if you want, you can follow me on Instagram, in which, well, I post other things apart from exclusive content, apart from though that of the YouTube channel. Well, Marta, again, thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you and to have you here today. And I hope you can continue with your project and do some great things for the Ridgway hawk.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you for having me. Thank you to all your viewers. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today.
The same. I say the same about you. Well, hope you enjoy and bye. See you on next episode.
Bye-bye.